Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Sarah Robb O'Hagan is a dear friend with boundless energy. That's why we all lovingly refer to her as our human exclamation point. She led the reinvention and turnaround of Gatorade as its global president, the digital transformation of Equinox Fitness Club as its president, and the transformation of Flywheel Sports into a streaming content business as its CEO. But most recently, Sarah was the CEO of Exos, the human performance company marrying her love of fitness with business performance. On today's episode, Sarah gives us insight into why she lives life so boldly and always brings the fun. Hey y'all, let's go there. Sarah Robb O'Hagan, one of my people, one of my girl gang. Okay, I'm so lucky to have you. And I have full disclosure, since we're about to go there, I am coming right off the heels of an intense therapy session with my husband.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
So when I saw last night that we were back to back, I was like, oh boy, how am I going to muster up the energy for the most energetic person in my life? But I'm feeling pretty good. But I just need to be open and honest that I might be a little raw.
That's okay. We like raw. We work through raw.
Yeah. But I'm gonna shake it off.
Shake it off. Shake it off.
Okay, you got my reference. Okay, so speaking of,
I did.
You were just there. Taylor Swift versus Beyonce. You've now witnessed both.
I know.
Go.
This one's tricky for me because I told you this on the weekend, Carla. I was like, I am all in trying to become a Swiftie. I've spent the last year listening to nothing but Taylor Swift with my daughter, Gabby, because she's a huge Swiftie, and going to the concert. I'm all in. And I will tell you, it's an extraordinary phenomenon of female empowerment that is just so wonderful. Like walking into the stadium of 70,000 people with so much love for each other is incredible. I will also say, for me personally, Beyonce still is my number one.
I mean, come on, right? I mean, at the risk of being canceled.
And honestly, no, I'm like literally growing up, I was obsessed with Tina Turner. My whole family knows this. So it was very natural for me that like Beyonce was a good transition for me. And I was lucky enough to be at the concert in London 2 days after Tina died. And Beyonce sang a very special tribute. It was one queen passing on to her next queen. It was very special.
Yeah, she is just epic. You know, I was giving it some thought on my hike this morning. I thought, what is it about the Taylor Swift movement? Because you and I vulnerably spoke about not being Swifties, which at the risk of being canceled. But I wonder how much of it has to do with the fact that there's not as much organized religion in our lives anymore. And the need to like be together and sing together and go to something together is, especially post-COVID, the need for connection en masse. I wonder how much of it is that.
And I agree with that. And I also couldn't help, but once I got there and I saw how female it is, I was like, the timing of this movement alongside the last 5 to 10 years of the growing empowerment of women is not insignificant, I think.
Yeah.
And I was sharing with my 2 kids, Joe and Gabby, that were there. We had all been to see Lady Gaga a few years ago. And I equally felt a movement in her audience through the LGBTQ community. Like you felt these 2 very distinctly different audiences, but really, really deeply connected audiences. And I was like, I actually think I get Taylor Swift more now because what she's done for women and the timing of women needing to feel empowered, wanting to feel empowered. It's wonderful.
Totally. By the way, one more to add to your list, Chappell Roan. I saw Chappell Roan at ACL and holy shit, I have never seen a crowd engage with an artist like that. I was blown away.
Oh, I really do want to see her. Someone I spoke to this summer saw her live in Chicago and said the same thing. It's quite extraordinary. Yeah.
It is something else. Yeah. That's to be discussed. TBD for our next podcast episode. That's your homework assignment. Um, okay, Sarah, so you've had an amazing career. I mean, the stories that you have from your career. I mean, turning around brands like Gatorade, uh, firing the likes of Tiger Woods. Don't know if I have to edit that out while you're at Nike. Your time at Equinox, Flywheel. You've really put yourself on the map as a CEO in the fitness world. How did that come to be?
Yeah. Well, what's funny, Carla, is I've spent, as you know, most of my career in sports and fitness, the sort of early days of my sports career at Nike. And when you work at Nike, everyone immediately assumes you were an incredibly good athlete as a child. And I played a ton of sports, but I actually wasn't terribly good. Like I never made it beyond the B field hockey team. Try as I might to make the first 11, I never did.
I am shocked by that.
No,
Are you serious?
I was not a very good like B team tennis player, but I loved sports, like, and played all sorts of sports. And I think what's interesting about growing up in New Zealand, where I'm from, which I find different to here in the United States, is that actually playing sports was compulsory for all kids. And I remember being, I don't know, 14, and we had to participate in the annual swimming sports heats and the annual athletic sports. I had to do hurdles, Carla, me, like my ass getting over a hurdle. I hated it. But we all had to at least participate, and we had netball teams that went down to the G team. You know what I mean? Like there were so many teams, they weren't terribly good, but they would get out there and play each other every weekend. And so for me, the sort of joy of sport has just been such a part of my life that when I got the chance to join Nike, it was just I had dreamed of like being in that company partly because I was obsessed with Just Do It and the whole marketing. And but it was funny because I think the sort of desire to achieve doesn't necessarily have to be sporting related. And I think there's a lot that comes from just playing sports, being around athletes that you can really, really vibe off, I suppose. And that's what I did.
Yeah. How much of that too was instilled by your dad
Mm.
and
Yeah.
your dad being a professional rugby player?
Yeah. So he played for the New Zealand All Blacks. And what's interesting is to play for the New Zealand All Blacks is like, I don't even know, the Brazil soccer team. Like, it's hard to explain the reverence with which our country thinks about rugby All Blacks players. And yet he never, ever, ever spoke about his rugby career when we were growing up. In his mind, that was then, this is now. It was a real kind of value of humility, which runs through most of, the professional sports crowd in New Zealand. So even though I think it was important to him that we all participated in sports because it was healthy and good, but I wouldn't say there was any expectation that we would be terribly good. My oldest sister is extraordinarily good at sport, played golf for at the national level, was really, really good. But it wasn't like there was an expectation or pressure, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. And you get to Nike.
I know.
Was it everything you thought it was going to be?
Everything. Oh my God. Like literally, I mean, I had studied marketing at university. I think you did too. I mean, it was the era of Just Do It. It was Michael Jordan. I mean, I can still remember my father bringing home my very, very first pair of Nike Air Stabs when I was, I think, 14, coming home from a business trip to America because it didn't exist in New Zealand. You couldn't buy Nikes in New Zealand. So to actually join this company that I had revered for so long was amazing. And it was an amazing experience. I was there in the early 2000s and talk about it. To me, it was my MBA, like just learning so many things, not only about marketing, about business, about scaling businesses, but about teamwork and incredible, like humble teamwork. There are no divas at Nike. There is no one who's like, you know, trying to be about themselves, or at least in my day, it wasn't. It was a real team effort, and it has stuck with me forever. It was just a wonderful experience.
Now you have an incredible Rolodex of friends and colleagues that are professional athletes that are well known. Did that happen from Nike? Is that where that really started?
Yes, started, I would say, and certainly a lot when I was at Gatorade too. But yeah, it's funny. I think with all of my sort of athlete connections, even though they were huge names that we all know now, to me they were still just really interesting humans. So it was like making a friend with anybody, you know. Um, and it's funny, like I don't know why this flies into my head, but I still remember the very, very, very first time I had to present to Serena Williams. And I was so nervous, Carla. I must have been, I don't know, 30, maybe early 30s, I think.
Oh, I didn't realize you guys knew each other that long.
Yeah. And I was so, so, so nervous. Like I had never presented to an athlete of that level in my life. And I was like, oh my God, there's so much writing on this. And I'll never forget sitting in a hotel room with her, and her little dog at the time, Jackie was her name. She's sadly since passed, jumps into my lap. And I'm like, never in my life did I think I had to like click the PowerPoint and be petting the dog all at the same time. But that's what we do. And it was, that's a big part of Serena, like her dog. We love dogs.
Okay, so that starts to give some insight as to what you were doing at Nike. Now, if I'm not mistaken, you were running endorsements or interfacing with the athletes, no?
No, so my first job was marketing, regional marketing, and then I was like what's called a brand director. So I was overseeing women's tennis and running. So these categories that happen to have pretty, significant female athletes in them. Yeah.
Okay. And so what did your time in Nike instill in you? What did you take away from that time?
Um, I would honestly say, definitely the power of teamwork more than anything. Like I often look back on those days and just go, it wasn't like I've worked in many different environments since then. I've worked in good environments and toxic environments. And Nike, to be that big of a company, I mean, in my day, it was only 10 billion in revenue, but 10 billion is a big company, right? Global, I think 50% of the revenue was outside the US. It was a big, big company. And it just had such a unifying force of everyone's played the game the same way. It's extraordinary to me that they were able to pull it off. I don't know what it's like now, obviously, but it's something that I always thought, I want to hold to that. Like I want to bring the sort of humbleness that we all were taught to bring to the job every single day.
Okay, you brought it up. You said you've worked in good environments, you've worked in toxic environments. Was Gatorade a good environment or a toxic environment? And what was that like?
Yeah. Gatorade it's an interesting one because I don't know that I would use the word toxic, but I would use the word extraordinarily high pressure that I look back on it now and have learned so much about the human system. And it was a level of pressure that wasn't healthy for any of us. It was because, it was coming out of the 2008 recession, and the whole company, PepsiCo, was dealing with not only the recession, so massive declines in every business line, but it was suddenly the beginning of the health and wellness movement. So salt, sugar, everything that our entire portfolio was based on was suddenly, not popular in the public discourse. And so the pressure from the top of the company, Indra, down to my boss, Massimo, to me, like all of us, was extreme. And so I would say, I was leading the turnaround of Gatorade over a period of 4 years and working 90-hour weeks, having just had my third child. And it was, at the time, I thought it was sort of a badge of honor. That's what you do and I look back now and I think a lot about the fact that someone like you is doing a podcast like this tells me it gives me so much optimism because we now are finally having this conversation. Like I led a team of humans and the example I set for them was just extraordinarily bad in terms of driving your, you know, self into a wall, into burnout, into all of it. And it never occurred to me that I was doing something bad for others. I can't even believe I didn't realize that. And I do now.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. I was talking to a group of executives and talking about this very notion in terms of, you know, that generationally, we believe that we equated hard work with good work.
Yeah.
And we beat the crap out of ourselves, whether it was in the gym or in the office. And it was no pain, no gain. And I was having this conversation with these executives and they weren't quite grokking it. They weren't quite understanding it. And I finally said, what are you modeling? Like, if you don't want to do this for yourself, peace. But to your point, what are you modeling for others? And as soon as I said that, they started to realize, oh, goodness, I don't want my teams, I don't want my children to live this way. And so it was kind of an interesting realization. So is that your main takeaway from Gatorade, that you didn't need to kill yourself to turn around a brand? Or what did you take away from that experience? Because why don't you talk a little bit about what you achieved at Gatorade? Because while it was difficult, it was a very significant milestone in your career.
Yeah, no, it was. And that we took a $5 billion global business that declined 2009. We lost 500 million off the top line of revenue in 1 year. I mean, it was extraordinary, the scale and the decline. And we did actually manage to totally reinvent the product line, the brand, the business, the distribution, everything. And we did turn the business around, and it went on to be very healthy in the years after I left. But it was, so what did I learn from it? I mean, I definitely still look back on it as like the most extraordinary team success of my career, I would say, in terms of like, there's nothing more amazing than the feeling of working as hard as we were all working. And for years, like our 2 years, we just had these terrible results. And I'll never forget the first day we had positive comp sales. Like, I had a disco ball in my office. We had Friday afternoon dance parties from that day onwards.
That's amazing.
The feeling when you finally do get to see your work working is incredible. And I think my biggest takeaway from the whole experience, though, actually was, I think the younger me, success was very black and white, this or that. It either has happened or it hasn't. And actually with Gatorade, the success turned out to happen in a very different way than we expected. Like, we were building all these new products in an effort to sort of create new growth runways. And what we didn't anticipate was that new products would take longer to grow, but they would jumpstart the base business. Like, we didn't see that coming. And
the power of the halo.
Yeah. And so it was kind of like realizing that success will come in different ways. And it's a journey. Well, I mean, it's so cliche, but there is no finish line. That's what we say at Nike. Like, every single day you are on a road, and it's going to be good and bad. And I think I was expecting this day that we get to the flag at the end of the race. And it's like, yeah, you did it, but that never actually happens. And it's a good learning, because I think it does actually then take you back to this, what you were saying about the older executives that don't have a sustainable way of leading. Because once you actually get into your head that there is no finish line ever, and I use the metaphor with the difference between athletes and executives. Athletes actually do have an off season. Executives never do. And so if you accept that it's like running a perpetual marathon that never ends, you better have some techniques for how you're going to sustain the human system. Otherwise, for yourself and for those that you're responsible for.
Yeah, I call that the Janet Jackson principle, the what have you done for me lately? Like, it doesn't matter what you just did. It's what have you done lately?
Yeah.
And I think what's important too, and what you're saying, is taking those little moments to celebrate.
Yes.
Because I see so many executives out there, or people in general, just in life, that they speed bump the milestones, they speed bump the wins versus actually enjoying them.
Yes, that's so true. That is so true. And the little wins are as important as the big wins. You're completely right on that.
Totally. Okay, so then Gatorade, and then if I'm remembering correctly, is that when you made the change over to Equinox, and how did that happen? And tell us a little bit about Equinox.
Yeah, so I was actually considering a role within PepsiCo that they sort of wanted me to move from Gatorade into a different business unit that required a different living in a different location, and it just wasn't something that me, Liam, and the family wanted to do. The same time, this call comes inbound for a role, which was leading Equinox, the fitness club chain based in New York. And it was funny, it was a smaller business. Gatorade was 5 billion, Equinox at the time was, I don't know, 700 million, something like that. And it was private equity backed, so it was very different to anything I'd ever done before. But I think that's what made it interesting to me, followed by the fact that I, in my 20s, when I lived in New York, I literally had moments living in New York where I could not afford to eat because I maxed out every credit card. And literally, I can remember a weekend where I went for 3 days without food, but I did have an Equinox membership.
That is so you, Sarah.
It's so me, because I didn't have air conditioning in my apartment. So I would like go work out and literally use their wonderful showers, their beautiful Kiehl's products. And so I was definitely a very strong consumer of Equinox. I knew the brand and the offering well. And I also was really intrigued by the gym business because I had started my career in airlines, and I love service businesses that rely on humans to deliver the service. So I was just really interested to go and try something new.
Okay. And how did it go?
So, to be honest, it was, you know, it's a funny one, Equinox. I look back on it as such an awesome experience from the what I got to do with the team. It wasn't a business in crisis, which was a nice change for me. It was like more, I was leading a pretty big tech transformation. It was more, hey, everything's working well, but if we don't get ahead of this, it's going to be a problem. So it's always nice to reinvent a business that's already on the front foot with momentum, as opposed to the other way around. So that was awesome. I also got to sit on the board of Soul Cycle and watch that extraordinary phenomenon happen. Julie and Elizabeth, the founders, are two people I just love and admire to this day. So I think for so many reasons, like what we all got to do as teams was incredible. That said, it was not an easy experience in terms of, the ownership of Equinox. And just, it's a very different mentality, I think, in terms of the difference between a public company and when you're owned by private owners that, have more specific thoughts on how they want to run things. And that was definitely a challenge for me. That was, and, much has come out in the years since in terms of some of the challenges that Equinox has had in terms of its culture, and it's definitely, to me, I look back, what did I learn from it? I learned a lot about what really matters, and in the end what matters is your own values, your own value system, and living by them and making sure you're true to them. And so in the end, I left Equinox at a time when the business was doing well, but it was time for me to be more true to myself, is what I would say.
Okay, so Sarah, I was going to wait to ask this question later, but I can't help myself. If you were to give advice to private equity, given your experience, what would you say?
I mean, I would say that there is so much more financial value to be accrued by being less sort of transactional and deal focused in your orientation and more human focused. Simple as that. And, as a very funny story that illustrates it, I will never forget. as long as I live, the first time Julie and Elizabeth from Soul Cycle came into a board meeting for the Equinox board. And most of the board, like incredibly esteemed and very successful financial players, real estate players. And they came in, and that business, that like the financial success of that business is like nothing any of us will ever see again in this industry, honestly, in terms of the margins, everything, the growth rate. And literally, the board was trying so hard to get to understand it through math. And Julie and Elizabeth were trying to say it doesn't work by math. There is no formula to explain why a particular soul cycle instructor is so magnetic and so charismatic that she or he can drive this level of loyalty. And we understand it because we instinctually have grown it, but we can't put it into a formula for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I call that spreadsheet management.
Yeah.
It's super dangerous when you're in the Excel spreadsheet and you're just kind of willing the numbers to go in a certain direction versus asking the right questions.
Right. Totally.
Yeah. I totally agree. Okay. Then you and I met around this time. You were going out on your own and you wrote your book, which, by the way, I told you the other day, I gift to every high school graduate.
No, you're so special.
I know. The book is so special. I think it's such an important message for young people. Tell us a little bit about how this book came to be.
Yeah.
And also tell us a little bit about that time in your life where you go out on your own and you really start to hone your message around success and failure. I want to hear in your words how that came about.
Yeah. So it started with, why did I want to write a book in the first place? I had started doing public speaking and, this happens to many executives. It's like, oh, do you have a book? And I was like, no, I haven't ever thought of that. And then I ran into someone who had an agent who connected to me, to Carol, my agent, who I absolutely adore because she and her wonderful husband, Kent, who has since passed away, they were storytellers that knew how to work with people to tell stories. And they took me or invited me to come to their home in New Mexico and spend a couple of days, as in their words, finding my book. And it was an amazing experience. And it was, as an executive, and Carla, you and I have talked about this, we often think in terms of really big vision down. Like that's what we're taught to do. You got to keep everyone on on one big page. As a writer, you have to go the other way around. You have to start with the smallest, teeniest story and write and write and write and pull up and see what it tells you. And it's a lot of work, actually. But through that process, I learned that I had this really interesting relationship with failure because even though at this stage I had great, luckily some wonderful successes with my team at Gatorade, et cetera. And I was at that stage where I'm getting on magazines and lists and winning awards. But in my head, I so deeply identify as a failure. And it was very incongruous for me that why was I on Fast Company's list of most creative people when in my head, I failed my piano exam when I was 16 and I still haven't gotten over that. And then I failed to get the grades I wanted in the last year of school. I failed to ever get an A at university. I can go on and on and on. Like I just fail. And I was like, then it started to become clear to me, if you're a young person and you're seeing people like me on magazine lists saying how amazing I am and not telling the story of all the many, many, that's just not fair. And at the time, funny, when I look back now, people talk tons about failure in the media, but they didn't at that time. I was actually one of the first people to write a book where I was going all in, saying, yes, I got fired twice in my 20s. Yes, I got so drunk at a Kiwis in New York Christmas party that I overslept one of the most important meetings of my life.
Oh my God. We have to pause. You have to tell that story now that you brought it up. That is the most epic story. So this is one of the key failures that you've called out before. Please tell this story.
It's the best when I look back now. So I was 26, I think, 27, 26. I just moved to New York. I was working at Virgin Atlantic Airways, Richard Branson's airline, which was just this dream of my life. I had maxed out my credit cards, as I said before. I was like literally down to the wire. And I had just gotten word the day before that I had been promoted to be the marketing director for Virgin, which is just this huge opportunity that was beyond anything that I could have possibly believed at that age. So anyway, I get this promotion, and the next day I'm meant to be in the office for a kickoff meeting at 9 with my new boss and my team. And I'm like, got it. And the office is a 2-hour door-to-door train and, bus ride. So I'm like, cool, I'm on it. So the night I go back after the promotion before the meeting the next day happens to be the Kiwis in New York Christmas party. Of course it was. And it was on a boat in the Hudson River. Of course it was. Like, all I can tell you is I just do remember at 3 a.m. trying to get a Christmas tree out of like some Christmas tree place in the Lower East Side with my friend Craig. I mean, all of it just went on and on. And then suddenly it's like 6 a.m. and I'm like, holy shit, we haven't been to sleep yet. So I was like, I got a big meeting tomorrow. So go out to my apartment. I'm like, I better just get an hour of sleep. We've all done that, haven't we? Big, huge. And I wake up at 11 a.m. 11 a.m. And I'm looking at and I'm like, fuck. It's like the scene from Four Weddings and a Funeral. So I literally like run out the door as fast as I can, and I'm running to the train. I'm getting on the train, and in my head is like, I've missed the meeting. I don't even know why I'm in a hurry because it's all over anyway. And then I get on the train, and by now I'm heading to get to Virgin around noon. And I'm like, literally, because we didn't have texting in those days, I'm ringing my friend Craig. What do I say? What do I say? Did I break my arms? Did I break both legs? Were we in a car accident? And then I finally get out there and I get to the office. I'm totally missed this whole meet. It's all over. And I go into my boss's office, and I was like, by the time I'd had an hour on the train to think about it, there was only one option, and that was to tell the truth. So I literally said to him, I said, Tim, I can't believe this, but I got so drunk last night that I'm celebrating my promotion that I overslept. Da, 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 da. And he looked at me. I'll never forget the death stare. I was like, I am either getting fired or definitely have the promotion taken away. And he stares at me. It's silence. I'm just like sweating. And then he finally, after about what felt like 10 minutes of silence, he just looks at me. He cracks up and he's like, Sarah, if you ever do anything like this ever again, you will not work at this company anymore. But I got to tell you, it was pretty virgin what you did last night.
That's amazing. I picture you in like a full-on sweat, smeared makeup, shirt on inside out. Like it's so epic. So I think one of the beautiful things, you were groundbreaking in leading this discussion around failure. And also in your book, Extreme You talk about all these highly successful people that embrace failure, that are unafraid of failure. And quite frankly, I think the other beautiful theme in that book is that everybody has their own path, which is what I love about it, right? There's not like a formula. We didn't set out to be who we are. And I think that's what's so liberating. But the thing that is probably the most important message is the truth shall set you free. In particular in that story, like being your authentic self, there's no other way. There's no better way.
Yes. And I think your point of the truth shall set you free, it's like it manifests in so many places of like, if you have just been fired, as I was, and you're having your first job interview and you are trying to cover it up and pretend that it didn't happen, the other person's going to figure it out sooner or later. So you better just say it. And the more
just own it.
Yeah. The more you own it, the more you're owning your own narrative, the more empowered you are. Like, yeah, it's a big lesson that once you sort of make that connection.
Yeah. When I was leaving my last post, a very high up person said, kid, you were too fast and too bold for us and wear it like a fucking badge of honor. And he said, it won't take people very long to figure out what happened. And that was extremely liberating because I thought, you know what? I'm going to own it.
That's
I'm
awesome.
going to own what happened. I was rejected and that's okay.
Yeah. And it's like, that's who you are. That's how you lead. That's what you do. And like, sometimes the right environment is like, yes. Other times, as I've experienced, no.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's go there. I want to bring back the toxic environment. What are some of the toxic environments that you've experienced and what did you learn?
I mean, let's see. I think it's hard to even put it into words. Like in terms of like toxic environments I've been in, it's funny, like there's the overworking, situation I talked about before, which I think is actually not ill what's the word I'm looking for? It's not an ill-intended. It's sort of just the bad outcome of what you just said of Gen X leaders who literally were raised. I mean, we are the generation that went from desktops to mobiles. Like we just literally, there were no boundaries. We didn't know any different. And I actually don't have any beef with leaders who got there because we just did not know any different. We're like boiled frogs. But then there's toxic environments where, there's people sort of politicking, plotting behind people's backs, not speaking directly in meetings. And what I have learned from those is that they are just so emotionally taxing that no amount of money, of business success can make up for the tax on your own psychology when you're in one of those environments. And, you and I both, I think now do a lot of mentoring of younger executives. And if there's one thing that is just comes through again and again and again, it's when people are in difficult working environments with really difficult like dynamics of people not, being straight, people plotting behind your back, all of the above. You got to figure out a way out of it because that is just such a suck on your psyche that you never get that time back.
I totally agree. I always say in absence of business results, that's when people devolve to politics.
Yeah.
Right. And that's when agendas really start to appear and self-preservation starts to appear. How do we eradicate that, Sarah? I mean, how do we change that?
I love the fact that you use the term self-preservation because I have been thinking about this a lot in the last month, actually, because I think, as you know, I just launched a new leadership course. And one of the things that we were talking about is about breakout leadership and making bold moves. And one of the things we have a discussion with the students, and we all come to the same conclusion, which is so many people kind of go through their careers thinking through the lens of self-preservation instead of thinking through the lens of doing the right thing for the business. And if you can do the second one, you're going to get so much farther and build so many better relationships that by the time you're my age, you're in a much better position. And, to give an example, I remember the Gatorade turnaround. Often Indra, who was the chairman and CEO of PepsiCo, she would come to us and say that there must be a way you can find an ingredient to make Gatorade, make people jump higher and run faster, because she was trying to give us her answer to the problem, which is the business is sucking wind right now. And everyone would default to, I have to do what Indra wants and start plotting behind anyone who wasn't doing what Indra wanted to preserve, like they felt like I'm going to hold on to my job if I do what Indra wants. And I would say to the group, guys, we know from the R&D team, no such an ingredient exists on planet Earth. So last time I checked, Indra wants us to turn the business around. And until she sees us come up with a credible plan to do it, she's going to throw ideas at us. But we've got to do what we think is right and be bold enough to come up with a plan and do what we think is right. And sure enough, we did. But it is incredible to me how many people in corporate America think that if the boss said this, then I should do what the boss said. The boss wants you to be successful and make the boss's results look good.
Yeah. Yeah. And how much time and energy and bandwidth is wasted on the political versus the customer.
Yes,
Yeah.
100%. It is wasted energy because it's always, then you get these back channel conversations, and those are the ones that you stay up all night thinking about at 3 a.m. Oh, it's awful.
Yeah. Versus how to serve the customer. Okay. So then you become a CEO. So one of the things I really admire about you, Sarah, is you made the jump that I haven't been able to. And so you made the jump from marketer and working inside of a large corporation to actually being a CEO of a business. And now multiple times. How did you make that jump? And what was it like for you being at the helm of a company?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm really glad you asked this question, because I'm very passionate about the topic of, we need more diverse voices to be CEOs. We both know that. And yet, a lot of people miss the opportunity to get on the path to CEO early in their career because they stay on their functional path too long. And so for me personally, when I was at Nike, I was a marketer. And I got to a fork in the road. I was offered a role. It was a massive global, what we called category marketing role. Or I could take a smaller role, being the general manager of a region of the US business, much smaller, much more tactical. Fork in the road. Because one, had I taken the marketing role, I actually don't think I ever would have become a CEO. The other, for the first time, I get to oversee the whole P&L. I'm finally getting P&L experience, which is so critical if you want to be a CEO one day. And the first time that you're leading others who have completely different functional expertise to what yours is. And that's quite a big shift from a leadership standpoint. Such that when I got to Gatorade and I went in as the chief marketing officer, but got promoted to president. They had the confidence to promote me to president because I had some general management experience in my background. Once again, every job I've had since then was on a path to CEO because I made that call. Is it a sideways step? Possibly even a backward step to get the P&L experience early enough in my career. And I really wish more people would do that or be aware of the importance of doing that, because we need more people to be CEOs. But to your question, even when you've been the president of a massive division in a Fortune, 50 company, or president of Equinox, like, it is not the same as being the CEO when you are the person who reports to the board and all of your C-suite are one level and then you are the CEO. And it's an incredible role. I love it. It's an incredible honor to get to do it. And it's a lot tougher than I certainly realized because of the loneliness of the job. People talk about it being lonely, and it's really lonely. And I remember one of my mentors saying to me once, what sucks about being a CEO is you only ever get to make the shitty decisions. Like, no one comes to you saying, hey, this is really exciting news. We're going to make a deal. It's even bigger than we thought. What do you think we should do? No, they're always coming to you with things that are hard, and it's hard. And you're constantly, I think what makes the role lonely is that your job is to you got to make sure your team is just full of confidence and energy and everything to drive the business forward. And up above you, you've got to be sort of fully the only one that's kind of keeping the board confident. Like, so you're sort of stuck in this middle zone. And, some days I would just think to myself, what I would give just to have Massimo, who was my boss at PepsiCo, just to be my backstop,
Yeah. I think one of the misconceptions about being a CEO is that you have autonomy. And I think it's interesting because, you have multiple bosses as a CEO.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what your experience was like managing and working for a board.
Yeah. I mean, kind of, I'll talk about my most recent experience. Obviously, I'm just finishing up being the CEO of Exos. So we are private equity backed, and our board is predominantly investors. We have one independent, and we have the founder and the former CEO are also on the board. So, and I would say, like, listen, I am really lucky that they have been just an incredibly supportive group through a very tough time. Like, we're a business that was crushed by the pandemic, and that's no fun for investors, nor is it fun for a management team. But what I have learned, and probably from sitting on other boards myself, is just, and I still don't think I do it as well as I should. It's something I constantly remind myself that I need to do more. And that's just, it's not about the board meeting itself. It's about the conversations in between. It's like what we spend so much time coaching our own teams, which in many respects is just not just, but is conversations that you're just constantly checking in. That's just as important to do with your board. Like, just checking in, even if you have a conversation and you end up talking about how both your kids are at University of Boston together, that's an important, like, how are they feeling? How are they doing? In terms of their orientation to their portfolio and their business, and just being really tuned into that. That's something I think I want to continue to do better.
Yeah. And as a board member myself, I want to ask this question selfishly, and you're a board member obviously as well too. What is the secret to being a great board member?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I think the secret to being a great board member is understanding your role. Like, governance and operating are very different things, and understanding, therefore, where you can be helpful, asking questions, making sure the team has thought things through. But that's where it begins and ends. And then after you've done that, that you are providing the broadest level of support to that team that you possibly can. And because at the end of the day, a team who feels supported and by their board, now the board should have very high expectations on behalf of all the shareholders and stakeholders. But if that team feels supported, they're going to run far more confidently than if they're like second guessing themselves because of board dynamics.
Yeah. Okay, now I'm going to flip the conversation, and you're leading us there because I actually think that's your approach to parenting too.
Ooh.
So I want to talk about the fact that you have raised 3 amazing and beautiful kids. You have a wonderful husband who I adore, maybe not as much as some well-known celebrity business person out there whose name rhymes with Mariana. We can edit that out, by the way. But I adore Liam and your children. I want to hear about your personal life. You've had an incredible career professionally, but you've also simultaneously built this really rich, incredible family.
I know.
How did you do it?
Literally was texting with a friend this morning who has little children about how it's just the greatest fucking joy of my life, my family, my kids. I mean, it's the same for you, because it's like you just want to say to every person with young children, my God, it's hard. But it is, once they get to the age that your kids and mine are, it's just so incredibly rewarding, because if you've put the hard yards in, and if you've taken the time to obviously to nurture them, but to also let them find themselves, like, that's probably the most important thing to me, has been just getting the hell out of their way so that they can stub their toes and fall over and make mistakes and figure things out. And then once you get to the point at the stage in life that your kids and mine are, when they do turn to you for really, really important, not advice necessarily, but just soundboarding. You go, oh my God, it's the best feeling in the world.
It's so true. It's so funny that you said soundboarding because we were contemplating selling our lake house, which is like super hard for me because I'm so emotionally attached to it. And I reached out to my son, Quentin, who's 20, and I said, call me this week because I want to workshop it with you. Because he has such an interesting way of looking at things. And I said, this will be a good exercise for us if we kind of walk through it.
I love that. And they do, don't they?
Yeah.
It's amazing how I so agree with that. The more you listen and learn with your kids, the more you are taking away from the experience. Like you're learning as you go. It's so cool.
Yeah. The other thing I've noticed about your parenting style is, man, the Rob O'Hagans bring the fun. And this is true for your leadership style, by the way, too. You are a super fun person to work with. I've seen this in your teams and I've seen this in your work.
Yeah.
What is it about you that brings the fun and how do you do it so much?
So funny. Like, I do wonder this. Like, I think about this quite a lot in terms of every neighborhood that we've lived in. We are definitely the people that are like, let's have a block party. Let's have, and why wouldn't we hire a giant water slide for the kids? Why wouldn't, why wouldn't we put on a lip sync battle? Why wouldn't we stage a pretend Olympics for the kids? I mean, who wouldn't, right? So I don't know, but I think it comes from, we all get the way we parent, I think, from our own origin stories. My family were really fun and they were the people that, brought others together. And I think it's very much in that light that I find myself being that way. And I, I think with kids, all kids are different, right? Like my oldest son is super, not super, I shouldn't say that. He is more introverted. The other two are super out there and like all into anything big, bold, flamboyant, and fun. And it's funny, and my husband's more like my oldest son. And like at times, I'm sure they're like, oh God, how did I end up in this crazy family? But we all have our role. And I love that. Like we all have our role in putting the fun together and bringing the fun together. And it's awesome. I think like I call us Team Rob O'Hagan for a reason. We are a team. Like we all have very different roles. We all reach out to each other in different ways when we need to, but it works.
Yeah. And I'm sorry to go here, Sarah, but I wonder how much of it has to do with your mom.
Yeah.
And your fear of Alzheimer's.
Yeah, definitely. So my mom has Alzheimer's and has been in a rest home for over 10 years, has not been able to recognize any of her family members for probably 6 years at this point. And that has been incredibly confronting, especially on the back of my dad actually had Parkinson's disease from the age of 55 onwards, which you and I are not that far away from that. And it's funny because it has full circle when we go back to the story about burning out at Gatorade. And now in my current role, I know for a fact that those years of stress at Gatorade, Equinox, Flywheel, where I was before, will have had an impact on my brain health for the long term. And that I wish I could have known at the age of 40 what I know now about that, because, one of the things that we teach at Exos is like when your brain is on 4 back-to-back meetings without a break, the effect it has on your brain is the equivalent of a brain under severe distress. And all you have to do is take 10-minute breaks, 10-minute breaks to be able to make the brain continue to feel healthy throughout the day. And it's little things like that you're like, my God, I was driving that culture at Gatorade, just expecting people to do what I was doing. That was having an impact on everyone's brain health. So now, having seen what happens when you're in your 70s and 80s. I'm just so much more passionate about the topic of there's a better way to work. You can be incredibly productive, but you don't have to like sacrifice your health to do it.
Yeah, arguably even more so.
Definitely more so.
So how does that impact how you move through the world, both professionally and personally? The fact that, for lack of a better way of putting it, you have this kind of like ticking time bomb in your head, which I hate. I'm always debating it with you, that you're worried about.
I do. And it's it's troubling from the standpoint, you and I talk about this all the time, is like, once you get to your 50s, I think it's so profoundly different to any other decade. And I'm sure the 60s, 70s, even more so. But the 50s is the first time you really are faced with the fact that what's in front of you is shorter than what's behind you, number one. And number two, you do not know how long you have great health. You just don't. And so you start having all those conversations that you and I have frequently around, do you take the next big, exciting, high pressure job, or do you go and plant strawberries in France? And because there's only so many hours that you're going to have left on this planet, and you want them to be tremendous hours. And it's so funny. Like, I don't think I ever knew that this feeling was going to come. Like, I just never realized that how quickly we would suddenly wake up and go, wait. And I have a lot of friends, I'm sure you do too, women who reach their 50s, and the saying, I'm asking myself what it's all about. And I've worked so hard my whole entire life. Work, 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 work. For what? Question mark. It's big. It's big.
Yeah.
It's big.
Yeah. Yeah. What is it all about? And when is it enough? When is it enough, Sarah? Like, when will we know?
You're supposed to have the answer to that.
Yeah. When will we know that we've gotten there?
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
When will we know?
Okay. So I have another question that you can plead the fifth on, but it's another conversation that I don't think is being had anywhere. And that is the conversation around the female breadwinner. And you and I are part of a small crew that have this conversation, which is dynamics in a relationship change when there's a female breadwinner, and it has its challenges. And societally, I don't know that we've fully sorted it out. In particular, during the pandemic, when we saw so much of the domestic responsibilities falling on us as women, even if we were the breadwinner. How do you and Liam navigate this? And yeah, talk to me about it. Guide me, please.
I think you're a better guide at this point, but it is so hard. Like, I think that there was no roadmap for women honestly getting to our level in business, women being breadwinners, women, like all of the things that we're dealing with now. There just was no roadmap. And so I think all of us collectively sort of have had the same moments along the way of like, how is this supposed to work? And then you go, supposed to? What is supposed to? And I think in the end, the only answer I come to is the answer is what works for you. And it has nothing to do with what works for anyone else. And I think the more I sort of have conversations around this topic with other women, the more I know that to be true. There are so many new and non-traditional ways of being in partnership now. And it's like, what works for you? And I think one of the things that you and I have talked about a lot, I think in any partnership, and I use the word partnership purposefully, it's about both people thriving, and you both have to thrive in your own selves to be able to thrive as a partnership. And I think, for Liam and I, that's what we have really spent the last, few years working on. Like, we're all kids are leaving home. He's transitioning starting a new professional life. I'm trying to figure out what my professional life is going to be. And I think you've got to do the hard work to get those pieces right. So you can then say, therefore, what are we as a partnership? For sure.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. It's not easy. But I love what you're saying in terms of it's not for society to define.
No.
It's for your contract between you and your partner to define.
Yeah. What works for you. And it's like, I have another really good friend that we talk about this quite a lot. And she's like, I just think Hollywood, the fucking romantic movie, it's bullshit. Like, name me any, women, breadwinners doing, that's the way life is going to be. No, you got to figure out what works for you. And not that obviously romance isn't wonderful and important and part of the whole package, but it's like life is hard. There's a lot that goes on, and each individual is dealing with their own shit that you got to work through,
Totally. Okay, Sarah. So looking back at your amazing career, which by the way, I always say to you, we're just getting started.
Oh.
So we haven't even seen the best of it yet. And we couldn't begin to predict what's coming for us because there's no way we could have predicted it at 18.
Oh, 100%. I agree with that.
What would you say to your 18-year-old self right now?
What would I say to my 18-year-old self? Honestly, I would just say enjoy every second of it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because it's funny, the older you get, the more you just look back and go, every moment is fleeting, Don't squander those moments. What's the Elton John song? Don't wish it away. I do think when we're young, like I even see my daughter Gabby is, as you know, almost 16. I just want to be going to college now. I just want to go now. I'm sick of high school. And I'm like, don't wish it away. Every minute that you're there is special,
Yeah.
Joy.
Yeah. Even the rough bits have richness in them, have good parts. They're part of our story.
They're part of the story. And you can either sit there, and I have done this in many parts of my life. I can remember just being impatient and instead of enjoying where I was in that moment, just impatient about what was coming next. Like I remember when I was leaving Air New Zealand to go to Virgin, I had to wait for my visa to be approved. And it was back in the days when the government shut down in the 90s, it did it then too. 6 months, I remember being in this holding pattern and just going nuts because I wanted to get on and I couldn't. And I look back now and I go, all the things that I could have, should have done if I hadn't been just sitting there frustrated,
Yeah, totally. Well, congratulations for everything that you've achieved. Kiwi immigrant you. Okay, so what's next, Sarah? You mentioned that you're doing some coursework. What are you up to next, and how can our listeners find your work?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So yes, I'm in a real period of total and utter openness, uncertainty, no idea quite what's coming next. I
hear you, sister.
I know, which is awesome. Like I have to say it, having stepped out of my current role, this is not the first time I've done this, like leaping off the side of the cliff, not quite knowing what's coming. But I feel really excited by the possibilities because they could be in many, many places. And so I'm sort of just at the moment doing the classic Shonda Rhimes, say yes and see what happens. But as my first step, you are correct. I am starting to do online teaching, which I absolutely love, on the Maven platform. I'm doing a course called The Breakout Leader, and our next cohort will be coming through in early December. So you can find that online, and you can find all my stuff at sarahrobohagen.com. So it's pretty easy.
Great. Well, as someone who has witnessed you literally jump off cliffs with great grace and land beautifully, which I did not dare jump off behind you, I have no doubt that you will land gracefully. And I'm calling bullshit on the fact that you're not an athlete. That's just a lie. That's that Kiwi humility coming
That's
through.
Kiwis for you. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I think I would have to be like in the New Zealand skiing team to consider myself an athlete.
Yeah, exactly. Your bar is very high. Yeah, I've seen you on the slopes too. This notion of you not being an athlete is ridiculous.
But I do say I'm 52. It's not too late to go to the Olympics. I keep going like I could be the Kiwi bobsled team. I'm in.
Totally. Yeah, don't think I haven't considered some Uruguayan team.
Exactly.
The Uruguayan ski team, I'm right here.
We can do it.
Totally. All right, Sarah, I love you so much. Thank you so much for spending time with us and sharing your wisdom. And I can't wait to see you blossom.
Oh, you too. Thank you for doing this, Carla. It's amazing.
I adore you. Thanks for your time, babe.